The headmistress wants to see me? Apparently so. I'm just as surprised as you, but this just shows how impactful this incident really was. I'll give you some advice. Don't let the headmistress wait. She is a very busy person. All right, I'll go see her then, but first. Yes, where can I find her? Ah, I almost forgot. You're still new here. The headmistress's office is located in the Central Mage Tower. Central Mage Tower? Was there such a tower? There is, but it's not accessible through normal means. However, now that the headmistress has called for you, the path should open. Thorn replied in a somewhat cryptic manner before directing Roland to some kind of hidden entrance. The entrance is there? Indeed, just wait there, and the path should open. He didn't quite know what to make of it, but it seemed that this headmistress didn't like people snooping around her office. This Central Mage Tower seemed like a place hidden away by some type of magic that even he couldn't perceive. When he arrived at the institute, there were no other mage towers than the elemental ones. This new hidden one was quite intriguing. Soon he was out of the enforcement department without really having time to discuss the issue he caused. While leaving, he noticed that the other mages outside were constantly glancing in his direction. It was clear to him that a large part of these people had been bought out by the noble factions, and would perhaps seek to make life harder for him. Is this the right spot? Eventually, he found himself in a large garden. It was quite calm here, akin to a park where people came to relax. To the sides, he could see students sitting against some trees or even sleeping on the grass. Not a place that he expected this super-secret central tower to be at. What he was standing before was a gazebo made of vines and wood. It looked like it was fully created by magic, and Thorn instructed him to take a seat in it while he waited. Will someone come for me? After taking a seat on the somewhat uncomfortable bench, he began his wait. While initially, the students were curious about him intruding on this peaceful spot, soon they turned away, as at this point they were numb to seeing people like him. It felt quite relaxing here, and he found himself thinking back to his home. However, this tranquility was interrupted by a shift in the magical energies around him. Dimensional magic? Roland had become accustomed to the strange environment within the academy, and one magic type prevailed. The whole main institute building was filled with smaller and larger dimensional pockets. While entering through a door, he could somewhat identify how large the space inside would be, and by these readings, he knew that he was going somewhere big. Soon, a path of vines appeared before him that turned into a flight of stairs. A large door was at the end, and he instantly knew that he was being called there. I guess this is where the entrance is. It seems like there are several layers of illusion magic along with concealment spells being used, and something that keeps a person from sensing mana. He could tell that something was used to keep this place hidden, which also disguised the spike in mana. Normally, such a grand spell would be easily noticeable from far away, but he couldn't tell even after sitting down at this gazebo. The students that were here didn't seem to be able to perceive the stare-creating phenomena either. It was clear that no mana was seeping outside, and only he could see it. Is it an effect that's minimized to whoever is sitting in this gazebo? Interesting, maybe I can use this. While pondering the potential uses of the concealment effects around the gazebo, he decided to stand up and follow the path of vines leading to the grand door at the top of the stairs. He used his runic eyes to try and identify the magic being used here, but to his surprise, he felt something that he almost forgot: a migraine. The structures here were ancient and also powerful. Judging by the small headache, they had to be a bit above his current Tier 3 capabilities, perhaps in the realm of Tier 4 Grand Rune territory. The magical energies shifted as he ascended, and he could feel a change in the atmosphere, as if entering a different dimension. Upon reaching the top, he found himself standing before an impressive wooden door adorned with intricate carvings and strange non-runic symbols. The door seemed to radiate a strange power, and for the first time he encountered something peculiar. This wooden door had been placed under some kind of enchantment just like the rest, but it was close to the level of runic symbols. It doesn't seem that I'd be able to use rune authority on these symbols, at least not at my current skill level. This trip was getting slightly more intimidating than before. The door was wide open, and he could step through, but he was hesitating. Before him was an unknown area that he would not be able to handle with his current level or abilities. An archmage who was potentially a Tier 4 class holder also lurked inside, and if he wasn't careful, his life could be in danger. However, he also felt that after ascending these stairs, there was no way of going back. It was even possible that he would not be able to escape, as he found himself inside a dimensional pocket already. After stepping through it, he appeared in a grand chamber beyond. The room was filled with various magical artifacts, floating crystals, and ancient books. This place was entirely made out of wood and other plant matter. The furniture, along with many other things, looked like it was connected to the ground and walls, as if it was grown out of the surroundings. The door that he walked through closed behind him and shifted itself into the wooden ground until there was nothing there anymore. At first, he didn't see any way forward, but soon new stairs started to appear to the side. It was quite fascinating to see planks being formed out of the wooden matter. Thorn said to just follow the path and not stop for too long. Without staring for too long, he decided to listen to the instructions that he was given. This whole place was filled with copious amounts of mana, and it was better to not trigger some hidden defensive response after touching something. The wooden stairs took him up through this tower, and on the way there, he entered various other large chambers. One of them was a vast library filled with shelves upon shelves of ancient tomes and scrolls. Another chamber housed a collection of magical artifacts, each emitting a unique aura of power. Then there was something that looked like a fruit and vegetable garden, and also an alchemical chamber. The trip was quite long as this new mage tower seemed to stretch out quite high. Thanks to the addition of various windows on the sides, he could see the whole institute from the outside. It seemed that this place was right in the middle of the institute, and hidden behind some type of invisibility spell that no one could see. He wasn't quite sure how it looked on the outside, but the structure reminded him of a large tree. Finally, after ascending what felt like countless stairs, he reached the top of the tower. The chamber at the summit was smaller than the others and was quite peculiar. Several arches and wooden columns were making a small ceiling, but the sides lacked any walls. At the center of the room was a wooden desk, behind which sat a woman with mossy green hair that cascaded down her back. She wore elegant robes adorned with intricate patterns, and her eyes, a deep shade of violet, were focused on the documents in front of her. Her ears jutted out to the sides and were quite lengthy, and her skin was light green. For a moment Roland confused her for a dryad, which was a type of plant monster that resembled humans. However, she lacked some of their features, like leaves coming out of their hair or bark on her skin. Assistant Professor Wayland, I presume? Her voice was calm and measured, echoing through the room with a sense of authority. Roland could feel the weight of her presence, and he inclined his head in acknowledgement. Yes, headmistress. You summoned me? The headmistress looked up from her work, her violet eyes meeting Roland's. She gestured for him to take a seat in front of her desk. The moment she did, one raised itself out of the wooden floor. As he sat down, the wooden chair seemed to mold itself to his form, providing a surprising level of comfort. I've been made aware of the recent events involving a particular noble lady and a subsequent hearing. It seems you played a pivotal role in the resolution of the matter. Roland nodded while getting slight goosebumps. He could feel her gaze falling on his armored body, as if she was scrutinizing his poor craftsmanship, which to someone like her was probably child's play. Yes, headmistress. I encountered the students in the training facility and acted with the institute rules in mind. With the rules in mind, do the rules state that you should break a man's sternum? He was unwilling to surrender, and even tried to bribe a member of the enforcement department. Roland replied quickly without stuttering, as he at least knew that the rules were on his side. This quick rebuttal seemed to cause one of the woman's brows to rise up. Bold words, Assistant Professor Wayland. It seems you carry the weight of your own sense of justice. I can at least appreciate that to a certain extent, but... The headmistress leaned back in her chair, her gaze never leaving Roland. He couldn't quite read her expression, and he wondered how much she knew about his background and his real motives for being at the institute. This is still a place for learning, and I would appreciate if you learn to handle such situations with less violent means. He was being lectured by this woman for his rash behavior. If this was all to this meeting, then it was fine. It seemed that she was giving him a warning about his methods that caused some people to be injured and also damage to the training facility. However, soon she started asking more questions, some that he wasn't sure that he wanted to answer. I have been informed that you are not a member of any noble house, yet you don't seem to care about the repercussions of your actions. Why is that, Assistant Professor Wayland? Roland hesitated for a moment, carefully choosing his words. He could feel the weight of the situation, and the woman was prodding for some information. It seemed strange that someone would not be scared of angering high nobles. She probably wanted to hear the true reason behind it, but he did not want to reveal his ties to the Arden estate. It was better to tie his behavior to his strong sense of justice, and perhaps make it seem like he just disliked the wanton abuse of power. that the noble students were guilty of. I just did what I thought was right and followed the rules of the institute. By those rules, every student is equal, aren't they? The headmistress nodded slightly, but he wasn't sure if his answer convinced her. After a moment of silence, she leaned forward, her fingers steepled together. You are an intriguing individual, Assistant Professor Wayland. Unusual, but intriguing nonetheless. Your actions have stirred quite a commotion within the noble circles, and some influential figures are not pleased with you. I have not called you here to lecture you, but more to give you a warning. A warning? Yes, a warning. The headmistress replied, her eyes narrowing slightly. Your actions could have consequences, ones that might not only affect you, but also some of our students. As long as you stay within the institute, I will guarantee your safety, but after you step outside these walls, you'll be on your own. Do you understand? Yes, headmistress. I'll be cautious and mindful of my future actions. Roland was a bit surprised by her words, as it looked like this archmagus was on his side. However, the message was clear. Once he was outside of the institute, she would do nothing to protect him from any retaliations from the nobles. He had expected some immediate consequences for his actions, but the headmistress's warning hinted at a broader and more complex web of political intrigue. Good, I'm glad that you understand. Now, while you did stir up the hornet's nest slightly, you managed to help one of our troubled students. Please keep up the good work. You are dismissed. Ah, yes. After getting praised at the end, he found himself stunned by the change of subject. The headmistress quickly went back to her mountain of papers and other magical artifacts, as if he was not there anymore. Thus, he awkwardly raised himself from his seat, and then slowly started to walk away. The path down was still there, so he assumed that he needed to travel down the set of stairs one more time. Did that go well or now? He wasn't sure if this meeting went well or not. It seemed that she was more interested in seeing the man who caused the incident than in reprimanding him. There was no punishment given, nor was he kicked out of the institute either. Then, as he reached the large tower library area during his walk, he was given another surprise. Ah, I almost forgot. Headmistress, you've been doing some interesting research. You might find this book helpful. Her voice resounded in the library, and soon a Vane appeared with a large hardcover book. It was presented to him, and he could not refuse something given to him by the Archmage. It was written in an older language, but he could understand the meaning. Mana and Soul Connection? It should help you in your research, but be sure to return it when you are done with it. You won't find this tome within the main library. It should help you with your Mana Phantom Dilemma. Thank you. You're welcome. Soon her voice vanished, and he was left with a large research book in his hands. One thing was clear. He wasn't given this book for no reason. The headmistress must have known that he was researching Mana Phantoms, something that he didn't tell anyone besides Arian. It was possible that she asked him about it, or that she had some way of monitoring the school herself. As Roland descended the tower, the weight of the encounter with the headmistress lingered in his mind. The warning about potential consequences outside the institute and the headmistress's knowledge of his research was perplexing. There was a possibility that she knew everything already, but he did not know her motives or her inclinations. Soon enough he found himself on the lower level, and the exit door presented itself to him. He found himself in the same gazebo with the students, and quickly made his way back to the enforcement department, where Thorn was waiting for him. How did it go? Thorn asked instantly after Roland entered his office. After a brief explanation of the encounter, Thorn scratched his head, a thoughtful expression on his face. I'm not sure. I just got a warning, I think. Roland responded, unsure of what to take away from that meeting. The headmistress didn't really explain much, and it felt more like she just wanted to see the new troublemaker face to face. Then he also received some research materials in the form of a book, something that informed him that she knew about his library visits. It didn't seem that she was an enemy, but perhaps also not an ally. He needed to be careful. Is that so? It seems you've made quite an impression, Assistant Professor. The fact that you were not punished is a good sign in itself. This bodes well for that. What was the name again? Surveillance system? After the hearing and the showcase of his recording devices, Thorn was intrigued by the possibilities. Yes, that. Are there any limitations? What about the costs? The costs wouldn't be anything outlandish. It seemed that this day wouldn't end so quickly, as he was now stuck explaining the Golemic eye monitoring system to Thorn. It could be made from Tier 2 materials, which would lower the costs dramatically. The more he explained, the happier Thorn seemed, and for some reason, Roland started thinking that he would be getting a lot more work than he initially signed up for. What did I get myself into? This was quite a day now. Where do I even begin? Roland asked himself after leaving Thorn's office. The hearing was over, and he had given his sister the small spider golem to keep her safe. Everything seemed to have finally calmed down, but he was not making any significant progress in his research. Then there was the headmistress who gave him some strange research papers, implying that what he was searching for was within a person's soul, and not just mana, something that he had no idea about. It also implied that she had more information about what he was doing here than he liked. Perhaps she even knew that he came from Albrook. I didn't feel anything strange. She probably didn't read my status at least. For the time being, it seemed that she kept to the Institute rules and didn't forcefully try to pry his status window out of him. Considering that she was a Tier 4 mage, her identification skill was probably way above his, and she would have no problem in disabling his enchantments that were hiding his class. It seemed like she was trying to be impartial, but I'm not sure. After finishing up with his enforcing duties, he had a few days of freedom. What he did was return to the school library with his new research papers to deliberate on his future plans. He still wanted to create that prosthetic limb for Burner, and there was no reason not to look into what an experienced mage had given him. Perhaps there was some type of deeper connection between mana and the soul that would allow him to connect a few dots. On his way to the library, he noticed that everyone was still looking at him in a reserved fashion. It was as if everyone was treating him as some type of rare animal. Eventually, he managed to arrive at the location, and soon enough he was studying the large book he received from Yevena Arvandus, the Xander's Institute of Wizardry current headmistress. Mana and soul connection. What does the soul have to do with mana phantoms? And do souls even exist? Roland whispered to himself while prying open the thick book apart. The pages were filled with complex diagrams, ancient symbols, and writings in a language that was both familiar and unfamiliar. The arcane knowledge within the tome hinted at the intricate relationship between mana and the soul, delving into the metaphysical aspects of magic that Roland had only scratched the surface of. This might take a while. As he immersed himself in the study, a lot of time started to pass. The cryptic writing forced him to search for books related to ancient languages, and it took him a while to fill in the gaps in his knowledge to even start reading the book he was given. He spent countless hours in the library, deciphering the intricate symbols and the meanings hidden within the pages. The book opened up new perspectives on the connection between mana and the soul, revealing a complex tapestry of magical energies that intertwined in ways he had never considered. He discovered that the soul was indeed a fundamental aspect of magical existence. According to the text, every living being possessed a soul, a reservoir of spiritual energy that acted as a conduit for mana. The mana, in turn, flowed through the soul, shaping and molding within its essence. In theory, the mana phantoms that he had seen moving around might have actually been the spiritual energy of the soul that, within the world of mana, created the illusion of a mana phantom. If this were the case, then he was looking in the wrong place, and would need to focus on this other type of energy if he ever wanted his prosthetic to move correctly. Could I just need to find the correct wavelength as I did with the divine spells? Is there something that could help me to get attuned to spiritual energy? There were creatures in this world that resembled ghosts and phantoms. The simplest one to encounter would be the will-o-wisp. It was a type of monster that could be found in haunted forests and sometimes crypts. The Albrook dungeon also had exploding skulls, but those were quite volatile. What he needed to do was create a device that could react to the mana phantom. If he could identify the energy, then he just needed to create a system that reacted to the changes in the phantom. At the moment, he could only read visual cues with the help of his own skill, but his senses were identifying it as regular mana. If this book was true, then perhaps the mana was just blocking the spiritual energy underneath that he couldn't quite perceive. Focusing on spiritual energy patterns could be the answer that he was looking for, and perhaps there were some ways inside this institute that he could research them. I wonder if this place has someone with a spiritualist class, but could a necromancer also work? When thinking about soul energy, there were a few sources that he could think of. First were the decrepit souls of the dead that the necrotic magic of necromancers could control. These energies were perceived as chaotic and unnatural, probably not something he could get his hands on without breaking the law. Necromancy was looked down on mostly due to the Solarian Church despising them and any cultists. Even though he had encountered a Lich and a necromancer, there was no time to do any research, nor was his home and estate to do so. When it came to spiritualists, they were a different sort. They didn't manipulate the bodies of the dead, nor did they force their souls to linger. They acted as a bridge between the material plane and the one supposedly populated by spirits. They could use souls to possess objects or even themselves for a boost in their skills. They could buff people through these possessions or by calling spirits for a sort of blessing. Luckily, this magical profession wasn't looked down upon by the church, and there was a possibility that one of these people was within the institute walls. I heard if a spiritualist lets a master swordsman possess their body, they can gain their strength temporarily, but it can backfire on them. I think it's called reverse possession. I guess I have my work cut out for me. How should I do this? After spending the rest of the day deciphering the book, he assessed his options. There were 3 things that he could do. First was capturing a monster that was closely related to spirits. The second was finding a spiritualist and either examining their spells to copy them into runic or having them cooperate in his research. The last and third option was spending more time in the library and going through more research papers. I guess I'll go with option 3 for now, and try asking Arian about the other 2 later. A large sigh left his mouth as there was much work to do. Over the next few days, Roland delved deeper into the extensive library resources, immersing himself in ancient texts and research papers related to spiritual energy, mana, and the connection between the soul and magic. His determination led him to uncover obscure knowledge that hinted at rituals, experiments, and historical accounts involving spiritualists and the manipulation of soul energy. Things were progressing, but he had a sinking feeling that he was being watched. Every time he ventured outside, he could tell that certain people were looking his way. It was quite obvious that he didn't make any friends with the Viola incident, and that he needed to prepare himself for the fallout. It wouldn't have been strange if he would be followed whenever leaving the school, and once alone, his new enemies could even strike. Luckily, things back home were silent, and his nightly responsibilities could wait. A spiritualist? There is one person like that, but, is there a problem? Well, the person in question doesn't come to the institute often. They are kind of an oddball. Roland finished up with the research for the day, and returned to the runic department to ask Arian a few questions. While there seemed to be a spiritualist professor around, they didn't come to school often and lived off campus. With how he was being monitored throughout the institute, it didn't seem like such a great idea to pack up for a visit just yet. She should be there for the next department meeting though. The next meeting? Isn't that in a month? I'm afraid so. Oh, that reminds me. Arian glanced to the side, activating his tail bracelet to summon forth a sizable stack of papers, accompanied by the orb that Roland had entrusted to him. You finished examining it? Indeed, it was quite fascinating. I haven't seen such a strange monster core in a while. It was the broken lick core that he had lent to Arian. Considering the stack of papers that he was given, he had done extensive research on it. Recreating the structure on another item of this sort would probably become easy with all of this insight. You write quite fast. Oh, that? It's just a spell. Want me to teach you? Roland was surprised by the amount of written words. Not something a regular person could do by hand, even with the help of skills. There also wasn't that much time for Arian to do this, so he was quite intrigued. After the question, he received a quick answer as he was presented with a peculiar spell that reminded him of some technology from the modern world. It's similar to a laser printer. A laser what? Ah, nothing. The presentation unfolded swiftly, featuring unique materials such as specialized paper and ink. These components fused together on the paper's surface, akin to a toner, shaping into coherent words. While magical quills capable of transcribing words through voice commands existed, this particular method directly extracted information from the caster's mind. Remarkably, it even hinted at the possibility of generating images, if the mental visualization was sufficiently vivid, a feature Roland considered potentially valuable for his purposes. Throughout the presentation, he observed the ink seamlessly adhering to the paper, illustrating a rapid and efficient means of filling out pages. Speaking about this monster core, are you trying to make a mage tower? A mage tower? Yes, I think it could be used as a basis for an artificial tower spirit, and it's already attuned to your mana. Roland acknowledged the statement with a nod as he retrieved both the research paper and the core, stowing them away in his spatial storage. Bringing it over to the institute to get an idea of what to do with it was the correct choice. Although constructing a mage tower wasn't in his immediate plans, the potential applications of tower spirits in performing calculations for mages intrigued him. While he needed to be careful with it as it was still the core of a monster, he believed with some adjustments, it could be repurposed without future issues arising. Thank you. No problem, it was quite enjoyable. Arian appeared content engaging in mundane research, a concept that Roland found somewhat perplexing. For Roland, research was merely a tool to achieve a goal, and if he never had to delve into it again, he wouldn't mind. His true satisfaction lay in the process of crafting prototypes and ensuring they didn't unexpectedly detonate in his vicinity. Now then, tomorrow is the day. Have you prepared the presentation? Sure. How splendid. Now don't tell me. I love a good surprise. The day for his lecture at the runic department had finally arrived. Throughout the week, he dedicated his time to research and, somewhat haphazardly, he put together an activity for the students. Uncertain about how his unconventional approach would be received, he aimed to deviate from the standard lecture format. The idea of standing in front of a group of young students for 2 hours sent shivers down his spine, prompting him to devise a plan that would enable him to spend most of the time seated. You're not afraid that I'll do something to embarrass the department? Not really. You have quite the head on your shoulders, my friend. I'm sure your lecture will be very insightful. He nodded in acknowledgement as he returned to his temporary quarters within the runic department. Taking advantage of the department's sparse membership, Roland found accommodation in the spacious vice head's quarters. It was quite the spacious room that he could even continue his research in. Before retiring for the night, he mentally reminded himself to rise early, recognizing the need to procure the essential items from the Institute's rune forge. As morning unfolded, Roland made his way to the forge, where the craftsmen awaited him. They handed him a sizable wooden crate that seemed to have a lot of parts within itself, just like you ordered it. But what are you going to use these parts for? A lecture. The absence of the master runesmith this time didn't pose an issue, given that the ordered crafts were merely Tier 1 runes, within the capability of even lower Tier 2 runesmiths. Everything was efficiently prepared within a few days, and while Roland might have personally fashioned them with more precision, he found little room for complaint. With the help of a floating platform and his mage hand spell, he transported the crate and left the forge. He steered towards an outdoor location within the same park where he had previously encountered the headmistress. There was a section here for outside lessons, perfect for this lecture, he thought up. I think I need my own assistant for things like this. Given the scarcity of personnel within the department, Roland took it upon himself to single-handedly organize everything. Utilizing his spellcasting abilities, he effortlessly brought over chairs and tables, upon which he began arranging the contents from within the box. Roland's meticulous nature ensured a well-organized setup, and he completed the task a good 10 minutes before anyone else arrived at the location. This should do it. Would be nice if none of the students arrived though. Roland harbored a hope that the rumors circulating about his unconventional behavior and actions against the nobles might dissuade students from attending his lecture. However, his expectation was contradicted when he observed Arian floating towards him, accompanied by Professor Delore. To his surprise, the number of students had not decreased, rather, it had increased, and they appeared genuinely intrigued by what he had prepared. This unexpected turn left Roland raising an involuntary brow. So that's that famous ferocious enforcer? He does look that part. Hey, be quiet. What if he hears you and turns you into a frog? In his case, that would be an improvement. Did you just call me ugly? The banter of the students reached Roland's ears, but he chose to ignore it, focusing on the task at hand. As the time for his lecture approached, more students gathered, some that probably were just here to look at the person who beat up a noble knight. Delore, who pushed for this lecture, had a look of disdain plastered over his face, and was probably hoping that he made a fool out of himself during this lecture. Arian, on the other hand, floated towards him with a mischievous grin planted over his feline face. Enjoying the attention, Assistant Professor Wayland? Not really, let us just get it over with. Haha, well, let me just help you a bit. Arian turned himself towards the chatting students, and started to conjure a light show with his magic, creating colorful illusions in the air. The unexpected display caught the attention of the students, diverting their focus from their conversations to the mesmerizing lights dancing above them. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're ready for a different kind of lecture today. Instead of the usual theorem, Assistant Professor Wayland has prepared something new for all of you. Assistant Professor Wayland, if you would. Yes, thank you, Professor Arian. With all eyes fixed on him, Roland noticed a mix of interest and scrutiny among the students. Some appeared genuinely intrigued, while others seemed ready to mock him if he faltered. However, Roland remained unfazed. He had meticulously prepared for this moment, and it was time to commence the lecture, and put any apprehensions to rest. Please divide yourself into groups at the tables. You will find a set of tools prepared there. Please get acquainted with them. The lecture had started, and the students moved towards the tables to find a strange assortment of various plates with runes on them. All of them had the same squared shape, but their usage was unknown to them. All right, let's delve into the assembly of runes into more complex structures. Roland began with his explanation. I'll first explain the meanings of these symbols, and then it'll be your task to combine them into a proper form. capable of producing a spell. Murmurs rippled through the students as they glanced at the runic symbols, unsure of how to craft a spell from them. Despite their initial confusion, an air of intrigue permeated the atmosphere, indicating a willingness to explore and understand the complexities of runic magic. They seem a bit confused. I should probably bring out the visual aids. Roland was aware that his approach might face resistance from the scholarly mindset prevalent in this world, where learning predominantly involved books, and practical lessons were often limited to monster hunting and dungeon exploration. However, he favored a more hands-on approach to education and opted to challenge the students with a puzzle. It would give their minds something new to tackle, and perhaps allow some to see things from a different perspective. To familiarize the students with the functionality of the square plates of metal, Roland introduced a runic device designed to project images. This technology mirrored the one he had employed in the hearing for playback of recordings. Externally, it resembled an elongated rectangle, akin to a steel beam used in constructing frameworks. Due to the limited time between his ongoing research efforts, this was the most of what Roland could prepare for the present moment. I'll now demonstrate the basic runic principles. Please watch closely as you will have to combine the runic blocks afterward. Surprisingly, even the students who typically paid little attention in class found themselves captivated by the runic symbols displayed on the projected screen. The direct correlation between these symbols and the smaller steel plates laid out on the tables made it easy for them to grasp the connection between the visual representation and the runic blocks before them. The alignment of the symbols seemed to spark a newfound interest, but he didn't have their full attention quite yet. For the spell effect to take place, you must always end the runic structure with an emitter-type rune. Otherwise, the runic circuit will not be able to activate. Certain terms related to circuitry seemed to cause confusion among the students. Roland's approach, rooted in practical testing and drawing parallels between the runic language and circuit boards, diverged significantly from the conventional understanding of this world. The concept of an operating system was foreign to them, but Roland remained unfazed. His primary goal was to deliver a lecture satisfactory enough to avoid expulsion from the institute, and their understanding of the subject was of secondary concern. Who he was more interested in today was Professor Delore. He had come to the class to keep his eye on him for the lecture. Delore appeared determined to find any pretext that would warrant Roland's expulsion. One such reason would be his failure to conduct a class today. Roland had to remain vigilant as he needed to safeguard this position until his research was done. Now, please put away the runic pieces and pay attention. I will showcase their use. Upon concluding his explanation, Roland noticed the students still appeared bewildered. They continued shifting the square tiles around, magnetizing them to each other, without fully comprehending the purpose. It wasn't until Roland employed his mage hand spell, manipulating a few runic structures and connecting them together, that the students finally grasped the essence of the lesson. As you can see, if you complete the structure in the correct order and infuse it with a bit of your mana, you will garner a spell effect. The practical demonstration brought clarity as a simple ball of light emanated from the connected runic elements. Roland's approach mirrored the grueling process he underwent during his time as a runic blacksmith. Secluding himself in an inn room, he engaged in a rigorous process of elimination, gradually comprehending the meaning of each runic component and how their assembly could yield different results. This lecture essentially recreated the same experiment, providing the students with the knowledge to produce various spell effects through the manipulation of runic structures. Now then, you will all attempt to mimic this process, assemble the runic pieces together correctly, and it will produce an effect. Oh, how interesting. Observing from the sidelines, Arian commented on the students' increasing interest in the lesson. While some remained hesitant to participate, others began experimenting with the metallic squares. After a few minutes, diverse light effects started to manifest, captivating the students as they noticed variations in colors and shapes. The hands-on experience had successfully captured their attention and ignited a sense of curiosity among them. Look, I made an orange triangle. Why is this square blue? I wanted it to be purple. Silly, you need to mix blue with red to get a purple color. Oh! Roland continued to guide the students through the process to the point of actively offering assistance where needed. The atmosphere began to shift from initial skepticism to a more lively engagement. The students, once hesitant, were now actively collaborating, sharing ideas, and experimenting with different combinations of runic symbols. Even the ones that weren't paying attention didn't want to get excluded, and finally decided to take part. Delore, however, continued to wear a disapproving expression. discontent with the unexpected success of Roland's unconventional teaching methods. As the session progressed, Roland noticed that some students were struggling to understand the nuances of runic assembly. He decided to circulate among the groups, providing guidance and answering questions. That's it for today. Please place everything back to their original location. Is it already over? No fair. I wanted to make a rainbow. As the lesson came to an end, Roland was surprised to find that some students expressed a desire to continue experimenting with the runic structures. Their enthusiasm and pleading looks caught him off guard. While Roland couldn't fault them for finding the practical lesson interesting and enjoyable, he couldn't shake the feeling that he might have made a mistake with his current approach, perhaps underestimating the appeal of hands-on, interactive learning. They won't make me do this again, right? Despite the appearance of a nuanced and carefully planned approach, the truth was that Roland had hastily put together a few elements to avoid having to speak extensively during the lecture. His expectation was that only a handful of students would be interested, with the rest possibly dozing off against the trees. Contrary to his assumptions, however, the students enthusiastically embraced the rudimentary runic components, treating them like new toys to be explored and assembled. Roland found himself taken aback by the unexpected level of engagement, and even more by Arian's words. Just magnificent. I just can't wait for the next lecture. Wait, don't tell me. Will it be another puzzle or maybe something more theoretical? Next lecture. To make things worse, he actually had a few ideas to make the lectures more interesting. As a runesmith at heart, he envisioned incorporating runic devices that even regular mages could interact with, such as the multi-purpose staff he had used in the past. This staff, depending on the area of mana infusion, could produce various magical spells. He decided to keep this fact to himself, as preparing for this lecture did take some time away from his research. Professor Delower, still watching closely, approached Roland with a stern expression. Interesting approach, assistant professor. However, I would advise you to stick to the traditional methods of teaching. This experimentation might not bode well for the academic reputation of the institute. Roland just nodded without replying while the man walked away. What is that buffoon talking about? I bet that he is just afraid that my department is garnering more interest from the students. Just look, there are twice as many people here than before and maybe, as Arian spun around in midair, visibly excited at the prospect of increased funding and student interest, Roland couldn't help but attribute the enthusiasm to his growing reputation. His notoriety as the man who defeated a high-level magical swordmaster seemed to be a key factor. The students, being primarily interested in strength, likely perceived Roland's runic lessons as a pathway to uncovering the secrets behind his formidable power. The allure of strength and the intrigue surrounding Roland's abilities had successfully captured the students' attention. That the lessons were interesting and fun was just the icing on the cake. This was such an eye-opening lecture. I might have to reconsider how I should perform the lectures. You have my thanks, my friend. You're welcome? How will I ever be able to thank you? You can start by helping me to clean this place up. As the lecture concluded, Roland noticed that not all students had taken the initiative to tidy up after themselves. Some tables remained in disarray, and Roland had the task of clearing them. Look at the time. I have to get back to my research. Arian, leveraging his department head privileges, opted to avoid the cleanup and promptly left. Roland found himself left behind to address the mess and consider potential new presentations for the following week. Should I just let them play with the golems or something? Lowly miscreant. This won't end the way you want it. I will see to it. A somewhat annoyed scholarly man strode through the halls of the institute, receiving respectful nods from those he passed. His name was Delower, a reputable department head. However, after the peculiar lecture conducted by the new assistant professor, he found himself irked. Delower viewed him as little more than a hoodlum, seemingly desecrating the sacred halls of the institute with his unorthodox methods. Delower perceived himself as a role model, expecting students to aspire to his level of scholarly achievement, rather than emulate what he viewed as the lesser pursuits of adventurers. Despite his disdain for the new assistant professor, he was not foolish enough to confront the man directly. Witnessing the events during the hearing made him cautious, understanding that any disruption or overt animosity might be recorded, leading to potential consequences. Professor, please keep up the good work. Of course. As Delower navigated through the corridors, he encountered one of the servants from a noble house, a charming lady in a serving uniform. Her duties revolved around tending to the wishes of her masters. Such servants were a rare sight on campus, often residing in dorms designated for higher nobles, and only emerging when summoned or accompanying their noble employers. The lady servant curtsied politely before presenting Delaware with a small container, which he swiftly concealed within one of the spatial pockets in his robe. Offering her a nod, she continued on her way. Delaware paused for a moment, casting cautious glances around. Concerned about the potential discovery of this act, he had become uneasy ever since witnessing the recording technology and learning of the enforcement department's plans to implement it throughout the entire institute. The fear of being constantly monitored had taken a toll on his peace of mind. "I'm being too paranoid. They haven't gotten the approval from the headmistress yet, and perhaps they never will." He disappeared down the corridor until reaching a seemingly dead end. Extracting a golden key from his pocket, Delaware inserted it into a hole in the wall that materialized out of nowhere. After turning the key, a door opened, allowing him to step through. On the other side, he entered a spacious study where a person with a long white beard sat behind a desk, clad in wizardry robes. "Master, we need to do something about that swindler. He does not belong in this institute." "Oh, he doesn't? Has he broken any of the rules?" "Not yet, but Vice Headmaster, we need to do something." The Master Wizard, a figure of great influence within the institute, peered at Delaware over the rim of his glasses. His office was filled with shelves of ancient tomes and magical artifacts, creating an atmosphere of profound wisdom. "Delaware, my old student, the institute has always embraced diversity in its faculty. If this assistant professor has not violated any rules, there's little we can do to remove him. It wouldn't do for us to become tyrants, suppressing new ideas and methodologies. He always liked this, saying one thing, but thinking something else." The person seated at the desk was Master Rathos, someone Delaware had studied under in the past. Rathos held a position just below that of the headmistress, Yevena Arvandus, though in certain situations, his influence surpassed hers. Unlike Arvandus, who kept to herself, Rathos recognized the importance of networking for true power. However, he was careful not to engage in anything that might tarnish his reputation. Unless there was a clear advantage to be gained, he preferred to adhere to established protocols, especially when it came to official business. "But, Master, he is undermining the traditional teachings of the Institute. The students are getting distracted, and they are starting to question the superiority of our way of learning. And that recent incident, if this continues, our associates will start to complain." "Ah yes, our dear associates, we can't have that." The man smiled and began to stroke his long white beard. Delaware remained quiet as he knew that his master was quite the shrewd man, and would probably come up with a solution to his current dilemma. "Oh, how about this then?" "Yes, Master? The young students should be at the correct age for further development, correct? Do you perhaps mean the advancement classes?" "Yes, precisely those. The girl involved in the recent incident, her level is relatively low, and she would likely be included in the advancement class, wouldn't she?" "I see, but what about our friend from the runic department?" "I was getting to that, so impatient. My apologies, Master." Delaware bowed his head, apologizing to Rathos, who continued speaking. "Considering his performance, I don't see why he can't tag along as one of the main guardians for the advancement class. I'll just need to put in a few good words. I'm sure that, considering the recent incident, no one will find fault in such a decision." Delaware nodded as Rathos revealed the main plan, an ingenious approach that could address multiple issues with a single move. The plan appeared faultless, leaving little room for blame to be placed on them even if something went awry. Delaware understood that making this plan a reality required contacting individuals operating outside the institute. Even if only the girl participated, it would already be sufficient to appease the interests he served. "If I remember correctly, the advancement classes were scheduled to take place within a few weeks, but we could probably advance the date. Think you'll be able to take care of the rest?" "Yes, Master, leave it to me." "Great, well then I still have some work to do." "Was this all?" "Yes, Master Rathos." Delaware turned to leave the study, the wheels of his mind already turning as he contemplated the best way to implement Rathos' plan. As he stepped out of the hidden door, he found himself in the same corridor where he had encountered the lady servant. The small container she had given him concealed a substantial quantity of golden coins. To ensure this lucrative business continued, Delaware was prepared to go to war with the new assistant professor. Through this new plan, such a confrontation now seemed not only possible, but also strategically advantageous. Now, who should I contact first? As the Delaware departed from Rathos' study, the old wizard emitted a sigh of annoyance. The magical quill he had been using to write words onto his parchment halted as he stood up from his seat. With a wave of his hand, he caused the drapes to close, plunging the room into darkness. The only source of light emanated from a mirror placed next to a large dresser. That I need to contend with such greedy idiots. Approaching the mirror, Rathos observed a peculiar aura of light emanating from it. For a brief moment, his reflection transformed into a grotesque figure covered in blisters and malignant-looking warts. With another wave of his hand, the unsettling image vanished, replaced by what seemed to be an empty room bearing no resemblance to the study. Soon after, flames emerged one after another around a large table, with his mirror represented by one of those same flames. Ah, Seed of Azure, early as always. There is no such thing as being too early, Seed of Crimson. The mirror reproduced Rathos' voice in a different manner than usual, and facilitated him in listening to the conversation among the other flames. Once the room was filled with all of them, attention shifted toward a particular flame, the one with a hue of purple. Seed of Violet, we need an explanation. A pitch-black flame expanded in size as it posed the question. The mirror used by Rathos started to quiver and displayed a few cracks. It appeared that the violet flame was facing some trouble, and the wizardly man couldn't help but smile at their predicament. Hey, you there, I'd like to have a word with you. You are intruding on the personal space of the student. Increased heart rate has been noted. Stress levels are increasing. Please refrain from approaching the student. Huh, what is this metal spider? Please back away. This is a warning. If you don't, this unit will contact a faculty member, and you will be restrained. A small spider golem attracted attention by causing a scene. It faced off against a group of 3 teenage boys who approached girls of similar ages. One of the girls, Lucienne Arden, was now famous on campus due to her involvement in a recent incident that had garnered widespread attention. Accompanying her were her 2 roommates, Adesuna and Marlene, who placed themselves on the sides without knowing what to do. The boys, who were initially confident in their strong approach, were taken aback by the unexpected resistance from the small mechanical creature. The spider golem that was programmed to protect Lucienne continued to vocalize warnings with ever-increasing volume. It was to a point where other students were made aware of the problem and started whispering, "Hey, isn't that the Count's son? Is he trying to curry favor with the Marquess woman? How indecent." 2 girls started whispering, and some of their conversation made its way towards the young man in question. This only maddened the young man, who was barely 16 years of age. "What is this piece of metal? Do you think that this thing can stop a son of a count? Now, get over here, this instant." The boy scoffed and ignored the stares around him. "No, I don't think I will." Lucienne responded while furrowing her eyebrows, and her 2 friends quickly responded after. "Stop bothering us. You heard what she said. Now go away. We don't care who you are. Leave us alone." They all stood resolute, and while they seemed to be frightened, they didn't lower their heads or budge from their spots. This made the young nobleman quite mad. Not something that he was expecting from lesser nobility and commoners. "You dare speak to us in such a tone?" One of the other young men moved forward and attempted to reach for the golem. But as his hand neared, he was pushed back by a sudden jolt of mana. The golem acted by producing a mana shield that kept the youth from approaching. Ouch! What the hell is this thing doing? The young man recoiled while clutching his hand in pain. The shield didn't only stop him from moving forward, but it also delivered a small jolt of electricity, something quite painful to the touch. "You insolent commoners! How dare you defy a noble?" The boy took a step forward, clearly angered by the girl's defiance. While Lucienne came from a baron's house, the other 2 were not nobles, something people like this young man couldn't allow to slide. The small spider golem sensed the increasing threat and emitted a low growl-like sound, its single eye glowing red. The crowd that had gathered to witness the commotion murmured and started to back away in fright. "Hostility has been detected. Initiating protective measures. Please stand by. Your mana pattern has been recorded, and a teacher has been alerted. Please stand down." Before any further developments, the small spider golem swiftly erected a larger mana shield and enveloped all the girls present. The previous jolt of electricity had left the trio of male students wary of getting too close to the shield. Instead, fueled by anger and wounded pride, they decided to retaliate. This was still a magical academy, and casting spells was always an option. "A teacher has been called. Like I care." The tension could be felt in the air, and everyone was eager to see how this all played out. However, before any of the 3 young men could mutter any chance, a voice called out to the students that were gathered here. "What do you think that you are doing?" As they looked through the surroundings, unable to identify the source of the voice, their attention was finally drawn upward and into the distance. The voice they heard had been amplified by mana, and given their mage backgrounds, they were able to discern the trajectory of the spell and trace it back to its caster. After following the magical path with their senses, they eventually spotted someone leaping out of a window, and that someone was coming their way. "Huh, isn't the main library there?" one of the students asked. But no one could reply. Everyone here was outside the main building near the converging path that led to the dorms. Before the incident started, all of these young people were on their way to morning classes. Now their attention was fully on the strange person that had become airborne, seemingly now flying in their direction. The person shot up into the air and flew in an arch. Their speed was truly tremendous, and eventually everyone could see that they were wearing a strange artifact under their robe. Emitting light and displaying enigmatic runic symbols, this artifact mystified the onlookers. Then, just before making contact with the ground, a powerful gust of wind enveloped this person's descent and created a cushioning effect. The force stirred up a cloud of dirt and caused any skirts to flutter during the mysterious figure's landing. "Is that? I think it's him, the full mithril enforcer. The same one that beat that Elithese? Yeah, didn't you hear? He is kind of famous right now." As usual, the young students couldn't resist whispering among themselves. The man in question, who was nicknamed the Full Mithril Enforcer, had just arrived. He positioned himself directly between the group of girls and boys, who had been engaged in a heated exchange. A glance revealed that his glowing visor was now focused on the group of troublemakers. "Do I have to repeat myself? What's the meaning of this commotion?" The trio of young men, once full of bravado, was now hesitant. They identified the newcomer as a powerful individual capable of defeating high-level knights. Despite having the support of their families and personal bodyguards, they acknowledged their inferiority compared to the magical swordmaster whom this man had previously defeated. While some among them doubted the rumors, they were still unwilling to test their luck. "You three, explain yourselves." His visor started glowing brighter, and his tone became colder, causing the students to flinch in fright. However, their leader quickly composed himself after recognizing the man's rank by the badge he wore. The swift adjustment to the tone was noted by the people here, who began to chuckle. "Assistant Professor, these vile commoners and the lesser noble here refused to heed my request. We merely wanted to have a civil conversation. Then when they refused, that metallic creature attacked us without a warning. It was a blatant falsehood that could be easily debunked with a single word from the onlookers, yet nobody dared to do so. Despite any dislike the people may harbor for the Count's son, there was little they could do. He remained a member of the upper echelon of nobility and was someone not to be openly challenged. The other high nobles refrained from speaking ill of their own, and the lower-ranking ones avoided doing so out of fear of retaliation." "Is that so? Young Lady Lucienne, is there any truth to his words?" The armored one turned his gaze to the other person who was involved in the scene, Lucienne Arden. The girl didn't flinch in fright like the group of young men, but instead smiled. The other students here weren't sure what to make of it, but soon she took a deep breath and spoke out with confidence. "No, Assistant Professor Wayland. They were harassing us, and bugged this small golem here. Acted in self-defense to protect us." She blushed slightly as she almost pronounced the cute nickname of the spider golem that was given to it by the young ladies here. "Harassment, is that true?" "Of course not. Those are blatant lies, Assistant Professor. How could you trust their words above mine?" The leader of the group puffed out his chest, as if he were trying to show his emblem that identified his ranking within the school. However, it didn't seem that the assistant professor was too interested in what he had to say, and instead focused on the small chubby spider golem there. After looking at it, the runic automaton moved forward and released a burst of light into the air. "Bzzz, what is this piece of metal? Do you think that this thing can stop a son of a count? Now, get over here, this instant. Bzzz." It replayed the exchange that happened between the two groups of students, which showed the Count's son as the villain and also a liar. "I hope that you realize that lying to an enforcer is against the rules, young man. Very well, come with me." "You want me to?" "But I didn't." The young man found himself bewildered by the unusual turn of events. Everyone present expected repercussions for the two commoners and the lesser noble, but the intimidating man appeared to have a different plan. Nevertheless, the trio of troublemakers were not ready to simply accept the situation, nor were they willing to comply with the orders of the man named Wayland. The Count's son was still trying to salvage his dignity and took a defiant step back while retorting. "You can't just order me around. I demand to speak with someone in authority. I won't be subjected to false accusations." I said come with me, there is enough proof, and I don't have the time to listen to your nonsense. Assistant Professor Wayland was unfazed by the young noble's response, and replied with a hint of annoyance in his voice. The trio attempted to back away while looking around them for some help, but before their retainers could get close, an explosion of mana took place. The man before them showcased an increase in mana energy around his body, which was quite obvious to the young mages here. It was an astronomical amount that they could barely comprehend and caused their knees to buckle. Come with me. I won't repeat myself again. You are in no position to make demands. You are a student here, and are not above the rules. For some reason, it appeared that the man was making sure that everyone present heard his speech. Eventually, the Count's son yielded, realizing that refusing would only escalate the situation further. The news of Viola's fate had already circulated through the dorms, and the man who brought her in was before them. It was evident that he cared little about their social status, and was likely capable of defeating their retainers as well. The Count's son hesitated for a moment while glancing nervously at his two companions, who were now regretting their involvement. The onlookers, including Lucienne and her friends, waited anxiously to see how the situation would unfold, and soon gave out a sigh of relief as the young man accepted his fate. I understand. Good, follow me. Assistant Professor Wayland nodded, but before he escorted the trio away, he called the spider golem. The students now understood that this magical creature was one of his creations or part of the runic department. It was a fascinating revelation, and indicated that this man was safeguarding the Baron's daughter by keeping the golem close. With interest they observed as he extracted something from within the golem, and replaced it with an identical part before sending the creature on its way. Go back to your classes and remember to follow the rules, no one is above them. Right before departing with the troublemakers, Wayland made a point to address the crowd of youngsters. They all listened to his words, as the shocking surge of mana was still on their minds. Soon, he left without uttering any further words, and the students quickly resumed their conversations with each other, baffled by the scene that had just unfolded before them. As the students dispersed, Lucienne, Adesuna, and Marlene found themselves at the center of attention. The incident had brought them into the spotlight once again, but this time, it wasn't for causing trouble. It became painfully clear that this one professor was protecting them and was quite strict. Even high nobility wasn't safe from his wrath, and that he took the Count's son to the enforcement department was proof of it. Did you see that? What's up with that mana? It's like a gushing waterfall of energy. I heard he defeated that swordmaster. He is the real deal. After chatting with each other, some of the bystanders approached the trio of girls who seemed to still be trying to process the situation. Hey, how do you know that man? Are you two related? Was he hired by your family? Do you know how he looks under that helmet? Is that his true voice? He sounds so peculiar. Lucienne, along with her two friends, weren't sure what to make of the whole situation or how to reply. They were now surrounded and barraged with many questions. They could only weakly smile at the other people and try to reply while inching towards the institute. The day had only started, and they still had classes to attend. What is this? It's a gardening fork. Some call it a digging fork. And no, I know what this is, but why are you giving this to us, sir? See those horses over there? Yes, their pens need to be cleaned. Use these to clean them. Wait, you don't mean you want me to shovel horse manure? I'm glad that you catch on fast. This will be your punishment. Now get to it. I will check on you later, and remember, you are being watched. Roland, who had escorted the troublesome trio to the stables, pointed at two golemic spiders. His creation stared at the group with their large eyes, and were closely monitoring their movements. If you don't complete this task, the next one will be worse, so keep this in mind. I hope this will do it. I don't want to keep making these types of scenes anymore. After leaving the noble children in the institute stables, he began making his way back to the library he had been in. He had anticipated that Lucienne might be confronted by another high-ranking noble, and a few days after his first lecture, his spider drone informed him about this incident. He decided to make a statement by playing it up the next time it was possible. Although his departure from the school library lacked grace, it left a lasting impact on the students present. He hoped that the news of this new incident would also spread and dissuade others from bothering his sister again. But this might be more of a band-aid than a real solution. After I'm gone, there will be no one to protect her. Where the hell is that guy? While walking back, he continued to ponder over his brother Robert. Since the incident with Lucienne, he had tried to contact him, but to no avail. It was as if Robert had vanished, and to make matters worse, even Lucille wasn't answering his calls. Without her assistance, he couldn't reach his brother and was left alone without any external support. He was hoping that Robert might be able to persuade his sister to transfer to another location, especially since Viola and her family still posed a threat. I don't like this, things have been strange lately. To make things worse, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched by someone. He knew that the other teachers and professors were mostly on the side of nobles. Every time he made his way through the institute corridors, people would whisper and avoid him. It was clear that he had become an outsider that most people despised, but there were some high points. It appeared that the runic department was experiencing a boom in growth. Thorn was backing the runic monitoring system idea, and Arian would oversee it. Although there was a plan to implement the system, some faculty members, including Delore, opposed it. They argued that it would divert crucial funding from other departments, a prospect none of the other mage leaders wanted. He soon returned to the library to resume his research, which was progressing smoothly. The only setback was the absence of the spiritualist from the institute. However, he received information upon returning to the runic department that indicated that this issue could perhaps be resolved, though it would probably put him in some unwanted danger. Advancement classes? They want me to do what?